Doctors who deliver babies. What's the most intense crap you've seen go down between families in the delivery room? A doctor was delivering the baby via venthouse, a vacuum extraction. He was pulling, and you do honestly have to put some muscle into it. Those babies are stuck pretty fast in there sometimes. Anyway, the suction cap came off the baby's head. This happens a lot. The father of the baby thought that the doctor had pulled so hard that he had pulled the baby's head off, so naturally punched the doctor in the jaw, who went straight down to the ground like a felled tree. Much yelling ensued, people holding the father back, him realizing that the baby was fine once we pointed out that the head was still inside. Unconscious doctor being pulled into a chair. Another doctor coming in to do the delivery. The mother crying hysterically. We had to have a quick and frantic conversation at the midwife station about whether to allow the father to remain in the room. We decided that from his vantage point it may have appeared that the baby's head had been removed and that he had a momentary loss of reason. He was also hugely apologetic and took responsibility for his actions. The doctor who got punched took every opportunity afterwards to tell that story as often as possible, and we all laughed. As a kid who was delivered by venthouse, now I'm just glad my dad didn't punch my doctor when I came out with a conhead. Look it up. Babies get temporary conheads from venthouse because of soft skulls. But no, he just saw the result and laughed at my ugly mug. His first child. I love my dad. Ambulance officer here. Got dispatched to 17-year-old female. Difficult pregnancy. Caller statement. Baby born. Didn't know was pregnant. Can't find umbilical cord. Who a boy. Get there. Healthy baby girl born. Mother and grandmother sitting on floor. Blood everywhere. Both emotionally shocked. Umbilical cord right where it should be. Grandmother holding baby. Outstretches arms and hands me the baby without words while my partner checks out mum. Grandma comes to me and just says I thought she was a virgin. Mother had texted grandmother while at work to say mum, come home, I've had a baby. The tension in that room. Holy crap. It confuses me how one doesn't know they're pregnant. Wife just gave birth and we asked that same question to our nurse. She told us about the time a guy brought in his pregnant wife and his pregnant girlfriend. The doctors thought that they were going to try and kill each other, so they kept them on separate floors. All the nurses thought the guy was a complete and utter douchebag. I was once present at the birth of a very white baby to not white parents. The parents spoke a different language to staff and there was this awkward silence while staff tried desperately not to exchange eye contact or stare at the father for his reaction. After a while, it was obvious that the father either hadn't noticed or didn't care, as he looked delighted and was chatting to the mother happily. Subsequently determined albinism ran in the man's family. Phew. Not a doctor but security guard outside delivery room. I just remember cracking up. WTF moment, as one lady was screaming she would not have her baby born on Hitler's birthday. I share a birthday with Jeffrey Dahmer and Chris Benoit, so I got that going for me. Workmate of mine is about to become a dad in the next week. His wife has been getting to know the nurses at their local hospital and listening to some of the stories. One day a bloke came running down the ward hallway screaming for help that his wife was in labor and they needed the docs to come quickly. The nurses looked around curiously and asked him, okay, so where is she? The color from the bloke's face drains for a second as he thinks this over. Oh crap, and he legs it out of there. 40 minutes later he returns with wife in tow. In his initial rush, he'd packed change of clothes, the car seat, camera gear, hightailed it to the hospital and left the missus at home. Poor bloke is never going to live that down. The way my dad tells it, partway through labor with me my mum said that's it, I'm done, I'm going home, and tried to get off the table. Mum claims not to remember this. If he doesn't come out in 15 minutes, we're legally allowed to leave. Doctor here. I have only ever delivered one baby, sorry for formatting, on my phone, so I'm in medical school on my obstetric rotation. I'm doing a late night shift cause I just want to see some births. Labor lasts forever. Yo. 20 something schizophrenic woman comes in, laboring with her 6th child. Her mother apparently has custody of the other kids, kind of a sad situation. Police had to break her door down because she went into labor and continuously screamed, "I'm not giving birth to Satan's baby. This is Satan's baby." The doctor I'm with looks unamused and just says to the nurse, "Sedate her a bit. We'll do a C-section if she refused to push, etc." After about 30 minutes and some sedating drugs, the doctor tells me to go in and do a pelvic exam and to report to him how far along things are. He went in with me and then got called out as I'm putting on gloves, saying he'll be back in a minute. I introduce myself to the patient, explain what I'm doing and start the examination. I feel a contracting sensation and next thing I know a baby's head pushes my hands out and I'm holding a screaming newborn. I am so in shock I am just staring at the baby and I start to feebly scream, I need some help here." Everything was well with the baby and mom. I had to throw away my socks and shoes. "You named him, too. Henry is a sweet name. It warms my heart. All the best, Henry." I gave birth in an emergency room hallway, courtesy of having sudden onset preterm, super short labor. We had just moved to a new town and they did not have a full hospital, only a standalone. So husband goes casually cruising up the freeway on the way to the hospital 30 minutes away and I had a feeling crap was about to go down. Saw a sign for the ear and just screamed at him to pull off. We get into the ear and they immediately call an ambulance to take me to a hospital with a NICU. Paramedics are literally wheeling me down the hall to the ambulance when my daughter started crowning. They rounded the corner of the ear to get to an area with some space and the dude in the room right next to us was in cardiac arrest. So this poor ear is completely empty except the screaming pregnant woman birthing a preterm infant in the hallway and the elderly gentleman dying. My daughter wound up being solely delivered by the 2 paramedics who were transporting me because the ear doc was busy running the code and the 2 nurses on staff were flying everywhere. They were running in and out of the other guy's room with meds and fluid, sprinting around with the baby isolate, etc. The other patient's family is clustered in the hallway staring at my gaping vagina while also crying over their dying relative. When my daughter let out her first cry there was a paltry round of cheers from that family and then they all went back to their crying. Meanwhile my husband is curled up in a waiting room chair heavy breathing from lightheadedness and everyone is ignoring his feeble cries for water. He was literally acting like he was about to die. In the end no one died. Baby was fine. Husband passed out, and 5 years later I became a paramedic. The other patient's family is clustered in the hallway staring at my gaping vagina while also crying over their dying relative. I'm crying from laughing so hard. Not a doctor but a firefighter. Got called for a pregnancy. Baby already born. Get on scene and mom and daughter, who just gave birth, are arguing back and forth. Mom summed her argument up best with "I told you you was pregnant." But mama, I ain't never had sex, I swear. I'm a doctor but this is not my story. There was this couple who were gonna birth their first. The father though had already a child from a previous marriage. So when it was time for labor, instead of being supportive and calm and leaving it to the professionals, the father went batshit and started screaming, "My previous wife wasn't in this much pain. Something is wrong." That is exactly what a woman in labor would like to hear. Yeah, I'm pretty sure I'd strangle my husband with my baby's old umbilical cord the second the nurses cut it and get the baby out of the way. I remember doing a delivery as a medical student working with a family medicine resident physician, new doc still being trained and closely supervised. Usually they let the students do a lot of it to get experience, but I remember the attending physician, experienced doc supervising the resident, saying no, let her do it. She really needs the practice. You just watch. When an attending says no, she really needs the practice. It's not a good sign. Well, baby itself gets delivered and I'm thinking all is good. After baby is born, you have to deliver the placenta, applying gentle traction on the cord to encourage progress. Gently but consistent. While the attending is distracted by the new baby, I watch horrified as the resident yanks on the umbilical cord. Of course, it snaps. She gets this look of oh crap on her face and oh crap is right. Now, in the best case scenario, delivery of the placenta will proceed because it was almost there anyway. That did not occur here. No matter what encouragement we gave, it was not coming. So drastic measures have to be taken. To the husband, the attending physician is explaining what will happen next. We're going to take her back to the OR. She's having surgery? Hopefully not, sir. We're going to manually extract the placenta. How you getting in if there's no surgery? Well sir, we are able to enter through the vaginal canal. It remains very much open. You're gonna put some tool up her pee? No sir, we'll be doing a manual extraction. Manual, with a hand and arm. You're going to stick your arm up my wife's pee? That's about right sir. You mean to tell me you're going to fist my wife? The conversation sort of went on. We get back to the OR and I watch in horror as the attending puts on a glove that goes back pretty much to her shoulder and basically just dives right in. She is in past her elbow manually scraping the placenta out. The wife is loopy but not out during this and is providing colorful commentary. When we finally finish and reunite her with her husband, she says, I swear to God I could feel them pressing on my lungs. The husband says, I thought they went in from below, and in beautiful theatrics she grabs his shirt, pulls him towards her, and through clenched teeth says they did. As for me, I decided to go into psychiatry. Probably not the kind of story you were hoping for, but that's my contribution. They did. The moment you realize you should have kept your mouth shut. I worked as a hospital parking attendant manning the booth. A car pulled up and the woman was midway pushing out her baby in the passenger seat. One relative in the back was giving her a back massage. One was fanning her. Her kid was playing on his DS. And her husband in the driver's seat nonchalantly smiled at me and asked for one ticket, all while the mother just delivered her own baby looking calm like it was a perfunctory task. I didn't know what to do, so I just gave them free parking. This is actually my grandfather's birth sometime in the 1920s. My great grandma was giving birth at home, on the reservation, Apache, and as the labor kicked in full swing, a crow or raven landed on the windowsill. Now, this is a bad omen. It means someone is going to die or has died. Needless to say, my great ex-2 aunts and great grandma's mother started straight tripping, shooing the bird and whatnot. Bird would not frick off, looked at my great grandma and squawked. Grandpa was born a few minutes later, while someone is trying to get the crow to go away. Crow flies off the minute the baby cries. A few minutes later, someone rode up on horseback to tell everyone that my great-great-grandfather had passed away about 15 minutes beforehand. That was right when the crow had landed on the sill. Family legend says that grandpa was his reincarnation. That is so cool. When I was a nursing student doing my OB rotation, a group of us watched our first delivery. There was no time to do an epidural because the baby was ready and he wasn't waiting. After the baby's delivered, the first thing the dad says is, you can rub at my ex's face that you did it natural. It wasn't a huge dramatic thing, but everyone in the room just kinda looked at each other. Like, buddy, your son was just born and you're more excited to one up your ex. I was in labor with my son for a total of 35 minutes. I had my first contraction and he was out 35 minutes later. Obviously, we didn't make it to the hospital. I had what I thought was a contraction. This was my second baby, and told my husband I thought I was going into labor. Could he please get our daughter ready? She was 13 months at the time, and grab the bag I had packed for the hospital. By the time he came back downstairs, I'd had 2 more contractions in about a minute. So I said we'd better get going. As I said it, my water broke and I had another contraction. So I told him he'd better call 911 for an ambulance, because I wasn't sure we'd make it to the hospital 20-30 minutes away and didn't want to have a baby in the car. He calls 911 and tells them what's going on. I only hear his side of the conversation. I later found out they were telling him to grab things, towels, shoelaces, etc. So I'm in active labor on the couch, waiting for the paramedics, hoping I won't have to push until they get there, and my husband starts freaking out on the 911 operator. I hear, "That is your job. You need to get here. That is your job." Several times he says that. The operator was trying to get him prepared if the baby was born before the paramedics arrived, so he's holding my 13-month-old, who was terrified because she had no idea what was going on, and screaming at the 911 operator that it wasn't his job to deliver his son. The paramedics did make it, with about 30 seconds to spare. One came over to me on the couch and told me not to push if I was able. He just got the words out and I said I had to push. Pushed once, and my son was born. My husband was so terrified and panicked. He's a good guy and a great dad, but he did not want to deliver a baby. Really didn't want to deliver a baby. I was laying there hoping the paramedics would make it and he just screamed about how they needed to be there. It was not reassuring. We brought a bunch of homemade goodies to the fire station, and they promised they'd bring a plate to the dispatcher. I'm still so sorry, he yelled at her. As someone who has delivered babies over the phone, this both cracks me up and warms my heart. Not a doctor, but growing up, my mother wanted to have my sister and I in the delivery room when my brother was born as a bit of a hands-on learning approach. I was 10, and my sister was 6, and we had seen enough delivery room TV shows to basically understand what was going to happen. Our church pastor's wife had volunteered to sit there with us. She and my mom were close and we felt comfortable with her, and she basically served as an escort out if it got too crazy in the delivery room. My mom was older at that point, 35, and had had a very rough pregnancy and was past her due date, so things began to happen very quickly. While she was pushing, without pain medication, she began to tear and she was screaming this horrible guttural scream. At this point my sister and I were cowering in the corner paralyzed with fear while the pastor's wife was witnessing the miracle of birth. My mom started to have a hard time breathing, and began screaming, "I can't breathe. I need oxygen," and this went on for a while, and finally my mom pushed my brother out, but he had pooped while being delivered and had breathed some of it in, which is very dangerous, called MAS, or meconium aspiration syndrome. So as soon as he was out, the doctors rushed him out of the room. At this point my mom was like a female lion, basically ready to murder anyone who came close in order to get to her baby. My dad had a hand choking mark on his throat, and my sister and I were fully traumatized. When my brother was brought back in, he was clean but still looked like a smushed up alien face, and the doctor gave him to me to hold first, which was kind of cool, but freaked me out because he kind of looked like a white earthworm after a storm. TLDR, my sister and I were present for my brother's violent birth and my mom almost actually strangled my dad. Pro tip: don't bring your kids to the delivery room. My parents are getting exactly 0 grandkids as a result. My sister and I were 12 and 13 and in the delivery room when our baby brother was born. The delivery went fairly smoothly but turned out 2 totally different ways for us. She is child free and intends to stay that way, while I am a mom of 2 and a labor and delivery nurse. Obligatory, not a doctor, but when my nephew was born, he was so ugly my sister didn't want to hold him, saying, "Serious as frick, put it back in, it's obviously not ready yet." She loves him to bits now, but we never let either of them forget it. A day or so after coming home with our second child, the first child, 3 years older, told us we should take him back to the hospital. He didn't want him as a brother anymore. Wife and I all but died laughing, all the while hugging the oldest and telling him we can't. Years later, upon recalling this episode, I realized the perfect response would have been, "We can't. We lost the receipt." The baby's father was caught cracking open the anesthesia cart and stealing meds. When police officers came to arrest him, he was sobbing and kept saying over and over, "You all aren't going to let me see my baby be born," and the officers were both like, nope, should have thought about that before." I'm an ICU doctor, and when they call codes in the birthing suite it's usually pretty awful. A horrific bleed like a CSI scene or a fitting woman giving birth. So your heart kinda sinks when they call that on the overhead. But this one time, we ran down to T3 code and dad had passed out cold on the floor next to mum, who was mid-push and still able to laugh at the hilarity of it all. When I was being born, my dad kept complaining to my mom, while she was giving birth, about how hungry he was and that his stomach hurt. She just gave him one of those seriously looks which made him more mad, so he went outside and ordered a pizza to be delivered to the delivery room. I think your pizza deliver guy posted up higher somewhere. Oh, friend's a midwife. Baby comes out looking very Asian to an apparently white couple. Lots of ums and looks. Turns out that the father was mixed race on his mum's side and she never mentioned it. My sister had jaundice, yellow-orange skin, and somehow had a head of thick black hair, which all fell out and her blonde hair grew instead, and our whole family is blonde ginger with blue or green eyes. The nurse asked my mum if the father was foreign. Not a doctor, but I'm a midwife. We do home delivery in the US. One labor mom was on the bed just working through the contractions. Dad was sitting next to the bed looking at me. I gave him a look and he knew I caught him. No remorse, just angled the screen better. Later on, same dad was just slamming shots and beers. After baby was born, he refused to put on the first diaper or hold his daughter. We needed to transfer the baby in due to some blood sugar issues. I go find his drunk butt playing video games in the kitchen. I told him we needed to go in. He was so pee off, he said, "Now it's 3 in the morning. Yeah dude, now." I drove the car because he was so wasted he couldn't even stand. Lots more, but that's one of the worst. Sorry you met my former neighbors. Wouldn't take his pregnant, hemorrhaging wife to the ER because he didn't feel like it. Never changed a single diaper because that's gross. This was a nice intense, and for the record, I'm a midwife. In Australia and the UK, midwives deliver the vast majority of babies. Anyway, there was a woman who was in labor with her 5th child. She and her husband already had 4 girls. She knew that they were having a boy, but he didn't. He hadn't wanted to know the gender. He really wanted a boy, not for sexist reasons or anything like that. And I know that he was a wonderful father to his daughters and wouldn't treat the son any different, but he just wanted a son. He sat in the corner, reading the paper for basically the whole birth. He wasn't ignoring his wife or anything. She didn't want him to touch her while she was in labor. That was just how she went about birthing. She also didn't want the midwives to touch her, so we stayed as hands off as possible. When the baby was finally born, she broke out in a sweaty grin, looked at me and said, "Tell him." I told him that the baby was a boy and he raced around the bed to give his wife a hug and a kiss and to meet his firstborn son. He was crying and laughing and just absolutely overjoyed by the birth of the baby. That was a good birth. That just made me happy. We are waiting on our 2nd son, and everybody asks if we wanted a girl. I always reply, I want a healthy child. That's all. Doesn't matter. I will still love them regardless of gender. Husband was sitting in the corner playing Candy Crush on his wife's phone whilst she was in labor. Up popped a text message saying, does he know that it might not be his? Shouting ensued and he walked out and left the unit with her crying. I'll add another from a colleague of mine. One woman during her 2nd stage, where your cervix is fully dilated and you can push the baby out, started pushing. As she did, she passed what has been described to me as an utterly massive 7.5 coric worthy crap that just kept coming. The midwives had to receive it on a large pad and place it quickly on the nearest place, which was the baby resuscitator, as it was still coming. They then went back to the woman to catch the rest and clean up. As they moved back over to her, she panicked and asked, is it breathing? They had to get the husband to tell her it wasn't the baby she'd passed. My wife pooped during labor but couldn't tell cause the epidural. She asked me what the horrible smell was. I had to explain to her what happened while nurse cleaned her up. Yeah, she cried. Holy cow, have I got a story for you. I'm not a doctor. This was my husband's birth in 1944. His mom was in labor in a small town birthing home. It was literally in the local doctor's home. Mom was in a back room with the doctor and a nurse. My husband's dad was in the waiting room, living room. The doctor came out and told dad there were complications. He could save mom or save the baby. Dad had to choose. My father-in-law got up, walked out, got a gun out of his truck and came back in. He pointed the gun at the doctor and said both better live or the doctor wouldn't. Then dad sat down on the couch with a gun in his lap. I've tried to imagine that doctor's state of mind at that moment. He went back into the room with the laboring mother and ended up pulling the baby out with forceps. Mother and baby lived. So did the doctor. My husband's skull is a testament to this story. It's like craters on the moon. I'm grateful he's never gone bald. Talk about pressure, man. Not a doctor, but my now ex mother-in-law got mad because I didn't want anyone in the delivery room other than my husband, so she ran around the hospital hiding. Now ex husband almost missed the birth because he was too busy trying to find her and calm her down. That explains the ex part. Teen mother told me if the baby comes out black the family is going to disown her. Her boyfriend was not black, her dealer was. Baby was black. They weren't happy but didn't disown her until the next baby. She was still using. My mom brought her special blanket with her to the hospital. It got picked up with all of the dirty delivery linens and tossed in the laundry room. My mom had dislocated her hip and broken her pelvic bone during delivery, so my aunt and grandma had to dig through nasty hospital laundry to find it, only for baby me to shred it to bits months later. Jesus, you destroyed your poor mom. Not a doctor, an emergency nurse. We had a man bring in his wife in labor. All goes well, but she didn't make it upstairs to L&D. Baby born. Everyone happy. Dad is on his phone texting furiously. We thought he was spreading the news. 30 minutes later he walks out of the area where his wife and brand new baby were, into another area where it turns out his side bint was with their 6th son. He was very lucky it was the middle of the night so no other family were present to have possibly discovered his secret. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.